Amin. Alhamdulillah.
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem.
Aslam, your voice is very slow, Aslam.
I have to stop share first, isn't it?
No. It's okay. It's okay.
Huh?
It's okay. You can keep it. It's all right. It's all right.
Okay.
You can share again. Yeah. All right. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. Amma ba'd. Myself, Muhammad Aslam Akbar from Department of Economics. So today, I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this seminar, Department of Economics. And today is a kind of special seminar with Dr. Mahyudi. So Dr. Mahyudi is going to talk on Islamic economics as an integrated science, a Tawhidic epistemology argument. I think it's quite interesting and also a trending topic as well. We heard many talks before, and what's something quite interesting is actually going to talk about the Tawhidic epistemology argument. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahyudi, for accepting this. I know I've been behind you all the time, asking, disturbing, demanding, but finally, alhamdulillah, it's going to happen. So I think most of us, we know Dr. Mahyudi is, he doesn't need any introduction, but maybe perhaps we have few outsiders as well from other than Department of Economics. So I think this is Associate Professor Muhammad Mahyudi bin Muhammad Yusuf, who obtained his degree in accounting and finance from the University of Salford, UK, before completing his postgraduate degrees, namely MBA, specializing in Islamic banking and finance, and then PhD in economics in IIUM. Upon completion of PhD, he took up a senior lecture at University of Science, Malaysia. Then later in December 2008, he joined our Kulliyyah of Economics and Management Sciences, International Islamic University, Malaysia. At the KNMS, he has held number of positions. One of them is Islamization Coordinator position. He also teaches subjects related to Islamic economics. His research works fall under the project of Islamizing the discipline of economics, which is actually he is going to do today. Other than several journals, articles published in reputable journals such as Humanomics and Intellectual Discourse, he has also co-edited 2 books entitled Zakat and its Poverty Alleviation Goal. The other one is Islamic Economics Education in Southeast Asian Universities. He also assists in reviewing submission to the International Journal of Economics Management and Accounting. Presently, Dr. Mahyudi is an associate professor at the Department of Economics. Proudly, he is our colleague. Alhamdulillah. So I think that's the introduction to the professor, associate professor Dr. Mahyudi. Hope perhaps I didn't add the recent one. Forgive me for that. So I leave the floor to you, Dr. Mahyudi, for Latafaddal Mashkuran.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, alladzi hadana li hadza wa ma kunna linahtadiya laula an hadanallah. Allahumma nawwir qulubana bi nuri hidayatika wa ta'abba bi nuri shamsika abadan abada. Allahumma faqihna fid din wa 'allimna ta'wil. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik 'ala sayyidina Muhammad wa 'ala sayyidina Muhammad. Alhamdulillah. So again, a big welcome to all of you. And first and foremost, I must say a big thank you to the department. And the invitation is something that I was not asking for. And even so, I think I have a moral duty to myself to actually share what I have in mind to some, so that you can always correct me if I'm wrong in any way. Okay, so Alhamdulillah, we are here for a Department of Economics seminar. And first and foremost, I think another special thank you to the organizer, especially the moderator, Dr. Aslam, for a beautiful poster And you know, this is something new to the department, because now with the viral age, you know, the WhatsApp thing, it has gone everywhere. And to my surprise, some of my college mates give moral support. And one thing they say, I look young. So then I have to confess that's an old photo. So anyway,
Yes,
thank you very much.
Yes, you are, Dr. Mahyudi, you are.
Well, 46, and the gray hair, as I said, does not make you feel young.
You are young until 49.
Okay, so what I have in mind to share with you is, first is to actually let me reframe the department seminar. It sounds big, it sounds, even the title sounds so big, but it's really not so big. I must actually just double check with you whether it's recorded, because Doctor, it is recorded, right?
Yes, Dr. Mahyudi,
Okay.
it is recorded.
Yeah, because some friends like Dr. Our good friend Dr. Irwan requested for it. Okay.
Yes, please.
So yes, and so it's a department seminar after a big start with Dr. Ali last 2 weeks or so. I got a shock at the level and the standard expected of the department seminar. So I said to myself, I have to psycho myself somehow to actually, you know, let me relax for the preparation for this one. So I rename it for my own consumption, Department of Economics Ideas Chat. You know, I'm trying to share some ideas here. I'm having a chat with all of you, the participants for this session. Okay. Bismillah. So what I will present today is very much a case of trying to frame something that is that I'm passionate about, and perhaps that's where I have some caveat emptor. I'm trying to sell some ideas here. So by having a caveat, I think all of you will understand where I'm coming from. Okay, so from there you will screen out any biases that you might notice. And well, after that, I'll try to explain to you the grand inspiration, something recent, something that will be a very long-term project for the Ummah if if I present it well later. And then the grand research program is something that is backing up the inspiration. It is useless to have a high aim without a proper strategy to achieve that aim, achieve that vision. And then to hone it further, to go into detail of things, that's where I talk about grand template. And this is where the epistemology part comes in. And for that, I have to break it into three. Track 1 is looking at input, track 2, process, and track 3, looking at the output. And it is coherent project, as I will argue later. And of course, I will try to conclude the session. Bismillah. So the caveat emptor, what do I have to explain to you? A better footing to evaluate the whole presentation. First, the word grand. Don't be surprised by that. It's actually relative to my own scheme of thinking. Necessarily to the world outside. So the claim of grand there, grand here, very much relative to how it occupies my mind. The problem or the issues, the matters that I will raise later occupies my mind. So it is very much relative to make a grand claim about it being absolutely grand. Okay. So and it is a cumulative the whole presentation, I would say, is a cumulative development of ideas. It's a cumulative in the sense that I was trying to show you the book. Yeah. just now, Methodology of Islamic Economics, this book published in 2020, of which I contributed a chapter, and the chapter is entitled Islamic Economics as an Integrated Social Science, Novel Ideas on its Foundation. So the idea about integrated science has been in my mind for quite some time, and this is perhaps a combination of what I have in mind, and with the hope that I can refine it further. So in that kind of exercise, in trying to identify the Islamicity, the Islamic content, usually what you have out there when we talk about Islamic economics is on the practical side. So people talk about Islamic bank and finance and other aspects, waqaf and so on. So as you go towards that kind of development, then necessarily you will actually talk about fiqh, usul fiqh, and of course maqasid sharia, because this is the track. This is actually the track that you have committed yourself to. If you want to extend it to the application side, to the what Professor Aslam used to say, upstream, downstream. This one is very much downstream. If you want to go that path, then that is the natural path of evolution of the science, and you will naturally talk about maqasid sharia. Okay, so that is the extension of the application, amaliyah side, the amaliyah side. And of course, this amaliyah is part of the intent of Islamic economics in the first place. Having said that, I think my trajectory is somewhat more inward, because as I was trying to develop my own understanding about Islamic economics, I have to actually talk about the adjective Islamic. So where do we get this adjective Islamic if not the character of Islam itself? And that character of Islam is not necessarily at the level of practice. It is very much at the level of Iman, at the level of Aqidah, at the level of Tawheed. And for that reason, my introspection leads me to literatures on Usuluddin, on theology, rather than on the fiqh side. Okay, so the philosophical inquiry there is very much suited to my interest in the first place. And to the good of the project, Islamic economics as integrated science, once we go back to the root of Islam, i.e. Tawheed, you will see that the fiqh or even the tasawwuf or akhlaq is just a manifestation of what you have in as Tawheed. So for that reason, I feel that I'm looking at the core of the project, the core of project of Islamic economics as a scientific discipline. Okay, so but of course I have to qualify. I'm no expert in Usuluddin. So what I have put myself, I put myself as a student of Usuluddin. So I take benefit from the discussions and classes that I joined. Okay, and naturally is very much classes on ilmu aqidah and ilmu kalam, and this is where perhaps some of you might might be seeing this first time, ilmu kalam. This is actually very much part of the Turath actually. And this is another an extension or an upgrade to the simple Aqidah classes that we learn, whereby then we have to look at the dalil and dialectics and how do we interact with other traditions, other theological tracks that are there in the world, whether it is within Islam or even outside of Islam. Ilmu Kalam have such flexibility and ability and intent, most importantly, to actually have such engagement, with anyone. That's why it's Kalam. Sometimes it is presented as this as an attempt to actually engage with others, okay, trying to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and how people can actually see our project as something also rationally feasible to them. So that is something inherent in Mukalam orientation. And what is most important here, in my own personal view, is actually what I have quoted from Arpasalan, Arpasalan, professor of history and Islamic civilization. He actually, in his book, in his book, he tries to actually signify Ilmu Kalam to represent Islamic philosophical tradition, with the Mu'tazilites, with the of course the Sunni tradition, and of course we have also the Shi'i tradition that is part of the overall broad Kalam discourse. Okay, and unfortunately, due to my own limitation, I have to focus on Ash'ariyah and also Maturidiyah, which I henceforth I just refer as A&M. Okay, for several reasons. First, it's about self-identity. It so coincide with my intent to know myself. I'm born a Muslim, but so we have taught all this creed, taught sifat 20 in our classes, 20 attributes, and as part of our Aqidah. But I have to know further, where is this coming from? I have asked myself, what about other sects in Islam? Theological sects. Why do I believe free will in this manner and not in that manner, and so on and so forth? Why have I been taught that God is actually doesn't have any jisim, or any other creedal positions that we usually encounter when we learn Aqidah at the basic level? So I'm questioning myself, so I go deeper and I have to learn about myself. So I look into what I associate with, and I associate myself as Ash'ariyah. So I'm looking at that as part of my inquiry. And then self-clarity. What is beautiful with this exercise is now, with the lessons on Mufidah, basically I'm referring to the Sanusiya tradition, madrasah, where you have at the very level, basic level, you have the Mufidah, and then you have the at the intermediate level you have Barahin, and then you have the Muqaddimats of Imam As-Sanusi. All these are actually Imam Sanusi's legacy. And as much as I learn about that, I become clearer, not just in terms of what am I expected of. It is also beneficial in the sense that I know how to interact with society, with science in particular, because I'm in this career path. So I see usefulness of all this discussion about hukum adi, hukum syar'i, hukum aqlin. Very much empowers me to be clear about everything that I have interface with. So I find joy in this trajectory of self-discovery. And then what motivates me even further is the majority in history. As you know, usually claims are made that at least 80% of the whole population of Muslim are actually Ash'ariyah wal Maturidi. Okay, of course you have the region, Uzbek and all, very much Maturidi, even Turkey, very much Maturidi. But in our region, the Malay archipelago, you have the Ash'ariyah to be the main track of theology. So this is something also about me, very close to the surrounding that I'm having my interaction with. And then again, it is to me the biggest plus point in doing all this is the harmony between naqal and aqal. It is very much the character trait of Ash'ariyah wal Maturidi. If you look at the side here, you realize I'm sharing with you this page 54 of the Muslim 500, the Muslim 500 2021. So when we look at Sunni theology, then the breakdown is Ash'ari Maturidi as representing the Sunni orthodoxy, and then the Salafi, Mu'tazili, and complementing the track of theology in Islam, you have the Shia theology. So the main focus is actually, if you go through this page, then just look at the last two sentences of each paragraph. Then you will realize that my claim about the harmony of Naqal and Aqal, revelation and reason, is very much the character trait of Ash'ari school. Yeah, you have revelation as essential and rationality as important. Okay, in classes on Aqidah, we talk about how actually the Aqal is doing khidmah to the revelation. Okay, and then in Maturidi school, again, the reliance on human reason. Okay, the reliance on human reason. As for the Salafi, then you have the emphasis on literal interpretation, and you have some sense of skepticism towards the role of reason. As for the Mu'tazili, you go to the other extreme where you have reason being the dominant force, or the dominant way of trying to understand what Islam is all about, and the relationship of man and God. So I find peace with the Ash'ari and Maturidiyah school, given that it projects harmony between Naqal wal Aqal. So I find it very much comforting to be looking into the Tawhidic epistemology that I will be talking about. Okay, so now the grand inspiration. The grand inspiration is something recent, and this is in reference to the talk by Professor Apasalan Achik Jank. I must thank Institute Darul Ihsan, Triple IT, and also Triple IT for organizing this very informative and inspiring session, especially at the Q&A part. And the Q&A part starts at around 1/17th minute, and I've shared with you the link. And this link and the minutes that I'm referring here is very much the reference to the Q&A on this specific question. The specific question on raised by our moderator that day, Professor Aslam Hanif. He was reading out a question, and this question says, so what is the future of Islamic civilization? So how did Dr. Professor Apasalan responded? He actually talk about this, the coming of a global human civilization. Okay, no longer can we talk about Islamic civilization in isolation from other civilizations. If you look at human history, then you know the future with the enabler of globalization, you can only speak of the future in the form of a global civilization. So for that to materialize, or for that trajectory to be actualized, you will have to see the contribution of global scientific tradition. Because in the end, that's how civilizations thrive. Without science, without knowledge, and the pursuit of progress, you will not have civilization. So that's why, of course, Professor Apasalan has rightly noted, it is very much backed by global scientific tradition. And what motivates me even more is when he said, develop it. This is in response. This is actually in response to our claim on how we bring into discussion with this context of the coming of global human civilization. How can we fit in? How can we bring in Islamic civilization? Okay, so as he interacted with some non-Muslims, the response that he got is, to which he affirmed, is this: develop it, it being Islamic scientific tradition, philosophically, not ideologically. It will be scientific. if you go down this track, our offering to the world is very much scientific. Our contribution is something that is more palatable to the masses, regardless of whether this is a Muslim society or a non-Muslim society, a Muslim majority country or a non-Muslim majority country. Okay, so in the end, what matters then is actually Islamic philosophy of science. So you have to be yearning for what is this thing? How can we see what is Islamic philosophy of science? Okay, for some reason, it is a factor for the revival of Islamic civilization itself. So that is another internal motivation that we have on our table here. So to my mind, this is very much inspiring, and I think it will occupy a lot of my own free mind or my own intellectual exercise. It is very much inspiring for the Professor Arpasalan to conclude it in that way. Then what is the research program? The grand research program that I myself am committed with or committed to is trying to clear out this identity crisis. I see that some of the participants are actually my students. So I'm sure they know how I bring in Muhammadi paper as the kitab, the kitab, for us to actually start our project of Islamic economics. We have to deal with this problem of identity crisis, because without a clear identity, it is very difficult for you to develop yourself. Because you are being put here and there, you are not clear as to how do you develop yourself internally, most importantly. So in Muhammadi, he talked about the origin of Islamic economics, where by this we are referring to contemporary Islamic economic thought, not classical Islamic economic thought. The interest nowadays is very much on contemporary Islamic economic thought. Valentino Catalan also focused on this and try to say that the classical Islamic economic thoughts has its own limitations, and on that note, I think the focus for us now is very much contemporary Islamic economic thought, while knowing how to interact with the classical literature. That is actually the formula for us to go forward. So Islamic economic identity crisis is a theme that is, mentioned by even Asad Zaman and a few others. Okay, so in Muhammadi, Akram Han, for to mention a few, Fahim Han to mention another. Okay, so you have the origin of discussion in contemporary Islamic thought is very much socio-political. You have Mahyudi, you have the reform movement, and all that supplying the fervor for Islamic economic thinking, which is very much needed given the that phase in Islamic history, in our own history, in the history of those nations, and in the context of the Islamic history as a whole. Of course, we need, after we got independence, many of the Islamic nations got independence. Of course, this idea about Islamic identity in the sphere of Takbir al-Manzil and Siyasah Syariah is very much needed, of course. So this is the beauty of how Allah plans everything nicely and fittingly and fairly and most beautifully. So in the end, one is not questioning the history. One is actually trying to learn from history and trying to make sure that we avoid any pitfalls that might be evident now as we look back at history. Okay, so yes, of course, Muhammadi also talk about knowledge discipline, that in 1976, we have that conference, and it is from there that we have a greater contribution on the scientific track. So there is that dilemma then, or rather the pull is actually towards socio-political aim, and then also the development of it being a knowledge discipline. So the bright minds of young Muslims somehow trying to grapple on how to look at the application side, look at the theory side, and this is where I think it led to the identity crisis, among others. Okay, so you have the normative positive dilemma. There is always lingering, and of course the label of us Islamic economics being normatively driven, and for that reason it is less recognized in the scientific community, is something that we have to take note of. And value fact, how do we put proper place for fact within our value discussion, is something that also has troubled us in trying to clear out our self-identity. And then the prescriptive orientation, the Fahim Han argument of how fiqh has dominated, which is again echoed by even Professor Aslam, how we have the fiqh orientation is needed. It's just that if we give too much focus to it, then that's where our identity is not very much clear. Are we fiqh? Are we economics? And this is something that we'll address later. So in the end, this grand template that I'm talking about next is the mechanism to actually deal with the identity crisis, so that we have this Islamic economics as an integrated science to be the identity, or perhaps to put it milder, one of the identity of Islamic economics. I was using the word the perhaps because I am in the field of knowledge generation, knowledge inquiry. So how I wish that our track is put on a more scientific track. That has been the theme of my works all this while, trying to make Islamic economics sounds more scientific, sounds more palatable to the masses. And by that, I mean the wider scientific community, okay? So for that, we have to actually see, yes, in the end, it is always the case of the marry of the two. It is very much, we have to take note of the policy side, of course. We know that we have to, in the meantime, or at the same time, simultaneously, we have to continuously do the theoretical backing to any policy that we want to propose. And of course, we know that it is not Islamic economics if we do not take care of the normative side. It is not Islamic economics if we don't take care of the value side. It is not Islamic economics if we do not take care of the prescriptive sides. Of course, we know all this. It is just that what kind of emphasis that we are going to put in if we want to make it more scientific. This is actually the central question of my presentation. Okay. To answer that question, I have this grand template. This is again in reference to my own scheme of thinking. I wish to look at the Tawhidic epistemology. Tawhidic epistemology here is loosely defined as theory of knowledge that proves Allah's existence and oneness. And it is a phrase, as rightly mentioned by the moderator, that is seen as something fresh, and you will see this in a lot of IIIT sessions as well, Tawhidic epistemology. Okay, so anyway, by that we can agree, it is not that we are trying to be too academic here. It is understood, in the end, we are looking at the theory of knowledge that will talk about Allah's uniqueness, God's uniqueness. Okay, and then the argument that I'm trying to make is, or rather, I frame it as by that I mean Tawhidic epistemology argument, as we are trying to clear out the identity issue, identity crisis situation. We are trying to solve it with this Tawhidic epistemology argument. How? What do I mean by that? I am actually saying that I'm trying to project or show to you a systematic understanding based on theory of knowledge discussions found in classical and contemporary Ashairah wal Maturidiyah trusted aqidah texts. Okay, so it is of a surprise, actually a good surprise, that as you look at the Tawhidic text, aqidah text, this is a bit more advanced by Al-Ghazali, Al-Iqtisad fil I'tiqad. Though he's talking about how do we find balance in our aqidah, in trying to be a muqtasid. Muslims are muqtasidun. We are actually man of balance. So yeah, he started off with some issues on qiyas and burhani, evidence, logical evidence, or argumentations which are needed as we try to defend our aqidah. Even in, of course, our classical text is actually in the Malay archipelago. The classical text on aqidah is actually Barahin, where we talk about the 20 characteristics or sifat. And of course, one should not, this is a side note, when Ashairah wal Maturidiyah talk about 20 sifat syllabus, it doesn't mean that we are limiting the sifat to be 20. This is actually a point to be raised here and reminded always. When we talk about 20 sifat 20 tu, tidak bermakna the limit kepada 20 saja. In fact, sememangnya the scholars know that you can say the sifat of Allah is limitless. It will project the kamaliyat, the perfection of God, and it will always deny any limitations and also weaknesses attributable to God. Okay, so this is the thing. Even in Mufida, if that day I was following a class on qawaid aqidah, qawaid aqaid of Imam Al-Ghazali. Again, the lecture or the teacher started with some epistemological, or rather theory of knowledge lah, the question of wasail. This is actually the character trait of our classes, aqidah classes. We start with epistemology. We start with the discussion on wasail al-ilm, how channels of knowledge. This is the character trait. So and of course it excites my mind as to why do we bring this discussion as a starting point in aqidah class. Okay, so that's one point. The other point is in the text. You can actually find some principles that is useful for us to take note of when we want to expand the horizon of knowledge. Some epistemological pointers that are there in the aqidah text is something that is so useful, like the one that I quoted here. In kunta naqilan fasahih aw mudayyi'an fadhalil. When benefiting from someone else's ideas, make sure it is authentic, or when making a claim, then bring along the evidence. This is from Al-Kubra Yaqiniyah of Shahid Ramadan Al-Buti, which is a contemporary text, but is trusted and known to be a shairah. Al-Azhari as well. Okay, so to break down this grand template, the argument is actually built upon 3 tracks. First, the input track. Second, the process track. And how do I, am I good with time here? Or should I go faster? Moderator?
Yes. Go ahead, Dr. Mahyudi. You have time.
Okay.
Yes, you have 30 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Bismillah.
Yeah.
So Tawhidic epistemology argument is broken up into 3 tracks. Track 1 looks at input, track 2 looks at process, and track 3 looks at output. So we will see continuity of discussion as we go along the tracks. Having said that, we can build upon the argument of Tawhidic epistemology based on each track. Each track is a standalone discussion. You can bring it in that way, and you can always also see it as a continuum or continuity of discussion. Okay, from track 1, because of course in the end we looking at input, process, output. Okay, this is very mechanistic and coherent. That's the point. When we talk about track 1, we are looking at wasail al-ilm. We talk about the channels of knowledge, asbab al-ilm. Yeah? Sometimes we use these phrases to mean the same thing, channels of ilm. This is where I put the acronym HAK, H-A-K. H being hissi, senses, aqal, reason, and khabar, testimony. So these are pointers from the book of Aqaid Nasafi. Yeah? Talk about this, and plus to that, he also talk about ilham. But how ilham is not part of our discussion, as we want to take creedal belief. Creedal belief. This is the position of Sa'duddin At-Tafzani. Okay, Imam Sa'duddin At-Tafzani. And then, of course, this is of his sharah on Aqaid Nasafi, wal Maturidi. Basically, that is actually a Maturidi text, but we are benefiting from that. So that is the input. We have to look at the standards of hissi, the standard of aqal and khabar. Then as we experience life or have this input for knowledge, for us to develop our own understanding of reality, how do we evaluate it? Then this is where the process track comes into the picture. And then here we are looking at hukum adi, hukum akli, and hukum syar'i. Imam As-Sanusi presents this very succinctly, very precisely in his kitab. With Barahin, you will find it there, and of course in Muqaddimah as well. So as we have this entry point, hissi, aqlun, and also khabar, and of course ilham, then we have the evaluative mode. How do you evaluate? How do you put evaluation on your habit, on habits that you see, patterns? Habit here is tendency of recurrence, tendency of repetition. That's what we are talking about here, hukum adi. How do you put judgment there? What kind of judgment can we say about the practices, or when we talk about gravity, that is actually a habit. If you a habit of nature, habit of nature. If you have something, you let it go, then it will fall down, okay, onto the floor. So basically, that is also a habit in nature and also in social behavior. You can see habits. If not, then people will not come with proverbs or good, what do you call this? Proverbs like manjada wajada, simple short phrases that actually depicts repetition, repetitions that we see in social life. And those who ever put more effort, they will get more. This is part of Sunnatullah, right? So this is hukum adi, as we experience the hissi part, or the entry point of hissi. And akli is very much, how do you govern your reason? I mean, what rules are there that you have to respect? Okay, if not, then the way you think will go haywire. Okay, as I was listening to the one discussion about free will, it's funny that the philosopher or the expert in the field, who is a Westerner, couldn't get out of his own confusion of mind. For me, it's because of this hukum akli, absence of which you get confused and you get daur, problem of circular reasoning, problem of tasasul, infinite regress, and so on. So that is hukum akli. You have to actually know how to use your reason, and you have to respect that. If not, then you will start to attribute weaknesses to God. Na'udzubillah. Okay, hukum syar'i is actually some texts, some teachers talk about hukum wada'i. Hukum wada'i or syar'i, wada'i is a more broader discussion. How people put procedures on you. Procedures are put on you. You have to respect. Just like our road regulations. This is wada'i, and it comes from man. There's another form of wada'i that comes from God. Okay, this is where the syar'i part, the fiqh part. Okay, on your side, you are just an operator. You are supposed to follow the rules. By follow, that means it will guide our actions. Okay, guide our actions. So all these are actually part of our evaluative mode, the process that we are doing as we take in the input of possible knowledge, potential knowledge that we gather from reality. As for the process with regard to qalb, you have the mutakallimun Ibn Khaldun, or sometimes he's also known to be a Sufi. His cemetery is in a Sufi cemetery in Egypt, in Cairo, somewhere in Cairo. So he has this tasawuf kitab, Shifa al-Sa'il, penawar bagi penyoal, the answer, the remedy for the questioner. Okay, so Ibn Khaldun has a book talking about the mujahadah process for the heart, and this is again something related to tasawuf. And then that's the process for the ilham qalb. Anything related to qalb must go through this kind of process, then it gains validity for it to claim ilmu mukashafah. Okay, the unveiling of a certain ilm that goes through directly through the heart. Okay, okay, I make this classification. Then let me just finish off track 3. Track 3 is output. Output is on the categories. Ilmu muamalah, and the basic classification is actually ilmu muamalah and ilmu mukashafah. In the case of Ibn Khaldun, he actually talk about ilmu akli and nakli, basically the relevation sciences and then the non-relevation sciences. The classification or categorization of muamalah and mukashafah in particular are in reference to ihya. Okay, Imam Al-Ghazali in his kitab Al-Ilm make these two distinctions. There is such thing called ilmu muamalah, where it guides interaction with you and God, and also with man. Now, of course, we do ibadah, we do muamalah, we do trade. Like in the case of Ihya, there is ilmu kasab wal ma'ash as part of kitab Ihya. So we're talking about how do we earn living, and how do we make use of our earnings, and that is very much ilmu muamalah. And as you look at the feature of muamalah, then you know it's kasbi. It's very much ilmu based on what we can acquire ourselves. We put effort in trying to understand economics. We put effort in trying to understand physics and so on. That is part of the ilmu human acquired knowledge. As for ilmu mukashafah, is beyond here. There is in the kitab Al-Ilm. Kitab Al-Ilm, by the way, is the first kitab in the compendium of 40 kitab in Ihya Ulumuddin. Again, ilm as being the starting point of discussion. That is also another reflection of how important ilm, the question of epistemology, in the context of the mind of Ahli Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and in this case Sya'irah wal Maturidiyah scholars. Okay, so So ilmu mukasyafa is actually beyond here because the process is different. The way to the terminologies are different, and it is very much exclusive in nature in terms of its discussion. So that's why in the end, our focus is very much ilmu muamalah and what we can acquire by ourselves, ilmu al-kasbi. As we put effort in the sciences, as we process our inputs of knowledge, then we get the output, and that is ilmu kasbi. And we cannot claim it to be ilmu mukasyafa because this is another different ball game altogether. Track 1. Let me go faster now because I have another 20 slides or so. I'll go faster. Bismillah. Track 1. So this is just foundational notes from Aqaid Nasafi, Imam al-Nasafi, Maturidi scholar. And then I present to you the kitab. Actually, this kitab is a sharah of the kitab. And I have the Malay translation of Aqaid Nasafi and sharah of Aqaid. In the sharah, you will see matan, the matan, the actual original text, the concise text, because the original text of Matan, the text of Imam Aqaid Nasafi is very short actually. So for Ilmu Aqidah, which is not the focus of our discussion, it is just we are trying to take lessons and benefit from the principles here. Khabar Sadiq matters, only Khabar Sadiq matters because that's the highest standard of ilm. We have to only consider Khabar Sadiq. Khabar Sadiq is in reference to mutawatir and this khabar rasul muayyad, where you have mu'jizat to enforce the quality of khabar sadiq, and then that khabar lah in particular. So hadith ahad is actually cannot be a basis of doctrine, and by that it also implies that in other scopes of sciences other than aqidah we can use hadith ahad. Okay. Ilham is not accepted, as I said, not accepted as a channel of Aqidah matters, Aqidah creedal position. Ilham, not accepted in that scope. From Barahin, this is a bit lengthier because now we look at a very, after all, Imam Sanusi is considered a mujaddid of ilmu Aqidah. So there's a lot to take in here for myself even. First is the universal approach that that characterizes this Barahin, and that is Ithbat al-Aqaid Nafi al-Shubha. We are basically trying to do tanzih wal taqdis. We want to avoid tashbih, any kind of anthropomorphism, association of human-like characters to God. We want to also avoid tajsim, any kind of jisim, any kind of association of things with God, because in the end you have the Ashura, verse 11, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Laisa kamithli shay. This is the foundational ayat that keeps on being repeated every now and again to actually to be the represent or the dalil for the universal approach. We want to avoid tashbih, tajsim. We want to avoid that. And then Ash'ariyah and Maturidiyah talk about the existence of God. They use Qiyas Burhani. In fact, this Barahin text actually look at the logical evidence, syllogistic in nature, so much so that the conclusion, the natija, are considered as principles in aqidah of Ash'ariyah. Okay, so Qiyas Burhani is the content of this Barahin, where when we talk about existence, we can make reference to kalam, cosmological argument, contingency argument. You can talk about design argument, and this is also touched upon in Barahin. when we see existence, we know things that, the laptop has a creator, somebody must have made it, and then from then you can look at the universe as being a creation. The Big Bang Theory talking about coming of existence of the universe. So given that is the case, then there must be a creator of the universe. So Kalam cosmological argument captures that, and it's touched by Barahin. As for the oneness, this is a beautiful expression of God's sifat, perfect sifat, perfection attributable to God, and the weakness. Sorry for the noise. Allow me just to close my window for a while. Bismillah. Okay, sorry for that. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so Qiyas Burhani on oneness of God. I think we can talk about this. How we can't associate any weakness traits to God. Yeah. So cooperation implies that weakness. Competition leads to destruction. Of course, we have ayat Quran talking about this. La fasadata. Yeah. When you have many gods, then you have destruction to the universe. In fact, in Barahin, how do we know that it's oneness of God? The reverse argument. You see the existence of the universe. That means there's no more than one God. It's just one God because the universe exists. Okay, so all that actually leads to Barahin looking at the La ilaha illallah. That is the final destiny of the book. And La ilaha illallah is framed as in the form of istighna, iftiqar, to signify the creator-creation relationship. Allah doesn't have any need of us. He's Ghani, Al-Ghani. He doesn't need any makhluk. And then iftiqar is that position of us, how we actually in need. As creations, we are always in need of Him. As human beings, as creatures, as makhlukats. And then A&M identity condition is something that I have to elaborate after this, because in the end, it is very much tenets in our exercise in trying to get more knowledge. The identity condition. Wajib, mustahilat, and jaiz. Okay, this identity condition looks at hukum akli and the influence of hukum akli on adi and shari. So first and foremost, we have to know how to think. So that's where we have hukum akli. Hukum akli will talk about the wajib, mustahil, and jaiz. In short, wajib talks about how Allah is wajib al-wujud, and then talk about the kamaliyats of Allah, the perfection of Allah, and nothing that is associatable to Him that can be seen as weakness. Okay, anything weakness, we have to put it as mustahilats. Any weaknesses is mustahilat. Okay, if you talk about jisim, then it's mustahilats. And then jisim in terms of it being associated to God, is mustahilat, mustahil. Okay, and then jaiz is the mumkinats. Jaiz is the mumkinats. It is under this frame of mumkinats that we can talk about adi and shari. Adi and shari is looking at regularity. Adi is looking at just now habit, frequency of occurrence, frequency of recurring. So regularity is what we are looking for there. Okay, so that regularity is actually the habit of God. Science is the formalization of hukum adi, science. Daily exercise, we actually come to conclusions based on our own observation on habits of nature. habits of people's behavior, okay, that we use for practical reasons to help us in our daily activities. And that is the very nature of hukum adi. You have such patterns to allow us to understand how we can interact with the society. The classical example of hukum adi given by our traditional ustad is in their umum barahin classes is makan kenyang, tak makan tak kenyang. Okay, this kind of pattern. If you eat, then you feel full. Or perhaps reversely is also true. If you are hungry, then to satisfy your hunger, you have to eat. Okay, then only you not feel hungry. This kind of pattern is something observable, useful, and it will allow us to be practical and efficient in our daily activities. This is part of the sciences. This is sciences. Okay, this is what we do. We try to actually formalize the regularity that we see in nature, regularity that we see in social world. Okay, so
Dr. Mahyudi, last 10 minutes, please.
Okay.
All right.
Last 10 minutes. Bismillah. Hukum syar'i. Hukum syar'i is about fiqh. I will not extend that further. Basically, this kind of class, hukum akli, the influence is everywhere. That's what we have to understand. Hukum akli, logical reasoning is very much, you can associate when you bring in khabar, then we talk about syar'i. When we bring in akli, then we have to make sure that our rules of processing it must follow the law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. You have to. If not, then you get confused. You yourself will get confused at the very start if you're not clear about identity. A pen is a pen. Pen is not a car. So the question of identity is very much something that is the starting point of rules of logical reasoning. And then you have the here by the side here I have this Qistas al-Mustaqim, which is a kitab of Imam al-Ghazali. Usually people talk about it as a mantiq or ilm logic book, an example of his contribution to the field of logic. But then I think we can also extend that benefit in the scope of epistemology. It is very much an epistemology, a book on epistemology. Even actually, this is just a conversation between him and Imami Shi'i adherent. He's trying to convince this person Imamiyah will not allow you to lead to the truth. Basically, how do you do that? You have to do this mizan ta'adul, mizan talazum, and mizan ta'annud. And all this is done within the frame of or in reference to Quranic logic, how Allah himself used logic in Quran. So any claim that logic is just the Greeks is actually falsified by that kitab. It's very much clear. As for hukum adi, our exercise in science is very much trying to look for regularity, trying to observe, trying to measure, trying to repeat things, trying to replicate things so that we see this pattern. And that pattern becomes a hypothesis, or we start with hypothesis. If we see more and more evidence for that pattern, then it becomes a theory. And then if you have more, then you have law of gravity and what other laws that you have in in nature, and also in social observation. Shari is something about qat'i, ghalabat al-zann. This is about the fiqh and also the rulings that we want to enforce, we want to introduce, so that we can have proper behavior and actions in the society. This is part of hukum syar'i. But then I like to, this is quite straightforward. I just want to say that you can benefit from the link here, but this is in Malay. Qistas is actually Islamization of ilmu mantiq. He actually used the experience of the conversation of Prophet Ibrahim and Pharaoh. If God is, my God can actually raise or let the sun rise from the east. If you are a God, then please bring let the sun rise from the west. That was the challenge and the logic that is being used by Prophet Ibrahim to Pharaoh. Okay, and then as I said, this link is actually in Malay, and it is about how ilmu mantiq is seen in the overall context within Islamic epistemology. And then, okay, this is something central to my position. This is on Bismillah. This is track 2. Okay, input. I'm trying to connect Hukum Adi and IE, Islamic economics. So here we have Yusuf Salim. Yusuf Salim actually talk about methods and methodology. Strong points from Yusuf Salim. As he talk about the methods and methodologies, he make it clear that fiqh is fiqh, Islamic economics is economics. Okay, economics is economics. These are, in other words, the spirit there is economics is hukum adi, fiqh is hukum syar'i. Fiqh, you use khabar as the main ingredient. Economics, you use observations in society as the main ingredient for you to do your analysis. So much so that economic assumptions, I quote verbatimly from Yusuf Salim here, economic assumptions and theories cannot be built upon human behavior as it ought to be. i.e. being Islamic economics, should treat fiqh and ethics as extraneous forces whose influence differ. Okay, and this Hakan Saribas, also another chapter in the book. Purpose of Islamic economics. This is an eye-opener for me and almost all of my students in Islamic economic taught class at the master's level. Yes, Hakan Saribas actually opened the door for this discussion today, because he actually say that we are looking at Sunnatullah. We are actually doing economics in the manner of trying to see habitual pattern and recurrence of human behavior in society. Okay, Sunnah expresses recurring, repeatable behavior, something that we can observe. And then just as in the natural sciences, there are certain orders in the lives of societies as well. And thus, we can talk about social sciences. Track 3, quickly, output. This is in the end, the output of it all. You have input, you have then track 2 being processed, then output. Output is ilmu mu'amala, ilmu kasbi, ilmu of Islamic human acquired knowledge. Okay, I think I've mentioned this about Mukashafa is how I coined this kasbi to be part of our main discussion in this presentation. Islamic human acquired knowledge is ilmu kasbi. Then this is, I guess, as I said, output. So if you go by this track, starting point of aqaid classes and how the Aqidah text actually help us in trying to see the usul within Islam, what defines Islam, Aqidah as understood by Asy'ariyah and Maturidi, sifat 20, 20 characteristics as being the usul, and number 1 here at the core of it. And then from that, you can actually philosophize science. And by this, I'm referring to ocean. Some friends with me looking at this ocean, the potential of occasionalism, causality, empiricalism, atomism, and nominalism to be the project for Islamic philosophy of science, which is a meta-science. That meta-science will actually help us to do science. When sciences, our focus is on subject matter, methods, and also theories. This is the classification of characters, elements of sciences mentioned by Arpasalan Achik Jeng in the history of Islamic scientific traditions book, and then you have worldly phenomena as the input, the reality that is in front of us, the things that we want to study. Economic pattern that will later be considered as theories. Okay, and I've shared with you now here some references. Ocean, part of the reason why this is new is because of the literature. The literature is somehow new, and this thesis by one expert of occasionalism. Here is the reference. He did a PhD there. Nazif, Dr. Nazif Mohd, Islamic and Cartesian roots of occasionalism. Occasionalism is simply put where you know that every action, occurrence of activities, anything, there must be God in it. God is there to actually, the efficient cause is actually God. The efficient cause is actually God. And the quwa, irada, will of Allah, all that is actually manifested in the phenomena that we want to observe, we want to study. Okay. So we can go through this. You can just click on this. Occasionalism explained through Malebranche and Al-Ghazali. As you can see, I purposely choose this video. First, it's quite short, and then it, as you can see, there is that interface where you have engagement with Western philosophers and Islamic philosophers. Okay, so on points like this, matters like this, we can see contributions of the Ash'ari school and Maturidi school to engage with the Western sets of philosophies, or any other tradition for that matter. As for this one, it is a more advanced discussion by Dr. Nazif, but this is about free will. I'm trying to show how complicated the discussion can be. Okay, causality and indeterminism is again something that is part of the philosophy of Islamic sciences. Okay, these are lists of literature. Of course, it shows the current nature of the literature. You have 2013, 2006, 2006 and 2014 literature. And the scholars here, I think I'm most interested with this Bilal Ibrahim, how he brings in empirical. Basically, Fakhruddin Arazi made an attempt to philosophize the science of Ibn al-Haytham. That is the discussion there. How Imam Arazi, the Mujaddid of the 6th century of Hijri, philosophized science. Okay. Development of Islamic sciences. Okay, I'm asking you to look at the yellow font. The yellow font is the track of Asy'ariyah Maturidi. And this is also another basis why I could only benefit from this track. There is continuity from Imam Abu Hanifah Fiqh al-Akbar. Okay, his kitab Fiqh al-Akbar is actually a kitab Aqidah. And he actually, from there you see the track. The yellow track is where the legacy of Asy'ariyah and Maturidiyah is continuous. It's talking about occasionalism, atomism, indeterminism, and nominalism. So there is that wealth of literature, actually, classical literature, to be benefited for our consumption. So in the end, with manhaj of A&M for Islamic human acquired knowledge, long history of the yellow line, yellow track, it's rooted with the clear teachings of Islam, the clear teachings that is compliant, Aqidah compliant. That is something that is important to note, okay? Because of the universal approach that I mentioned. The continuous process of refinement. When you have that scientific community, lively scientific community, engaging on topics of mantiq and engaging in topic of mumkinat, mawjudat, and then ilahiyat and nubuwat. All this actually is very rich in the Asy'ariyah al-Maturidi. And of late, you can talk about Said Nursi contribution as well. Okay, so you have the continuous refinement is self-correction, all that is done by polymath. We are not talking about small figures. All the names that is there in the yellow track are big names in the scholarly world of Islam. You have Imam al-Ghazali to be the Mujaddid of the 5th century Hijri. You have Imam al-Razi as the 6th Mujaddid in the 6th century Hijri, as part of the contributors in trying to engage with the problems, contemporary problems of their time, and that's where we can benefit from them. And as for this, we can talk about this refresh package. As I've briefly shown you, there is this thing called Ocean. That package is a meta science, and here I am referring to yes, this particular slide is looking at how I have benefited from the IIIT East Asia online class, online video on Islam and philosophy of science. Professor Hazim actually has done an 8 series, and that 8 series is very much useful. And in the 6th series, he talked about this particular dilemma of how do we deal with science and Islam and science. Islam and science, he actually talked about this need for meta science, philosophy of science. It must be coherent science. It must be Aqidah compliant science, or philosophy of science. So you have, of course, the rejection of scientism. Scientism we reject, but science is at the level of first order. We can do it with the clear understanding that the second order is respected. What is the second order? My my suggestion is Ocean. Ocean as the Islamic philosophy of science. Ocean here, the acronym for occasionalism, causality, empiricism, and then atomism, and also nominalism. Okay, so this is the 5 coherent theories. Very much so, because as I said, there is a lively contribution of scientific community that hone in and that polish up that understanding on each of this component of Ocean. And what's important here, we can actually tap the heritage, the heritage, the ilmu turath al-Islami, to be part of that critical contribution for the coming of a global civilization as projected, or as expected by Professor Arpasalan Achijeng. In the end, my concluding remark would be with the Tawhidic epistemology, in particular the manhaj, A&M manhaj. Hopefully we can actually see Islamic economics as integrated science, but more on the knowledge discipline part, more on the positive side, more on the appreciation of facts side, more on the descriptive side of things being projected, so that we can actually have clarity and traction for Islamic economics to be developed as an integrated science. With that, thank you very much for your time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Mahyudi. That was quite interesting talk. I think it should be compartmentalized into many sessions, by the way. I think since I asked you to do that, but I didn't realize that, that it's a huge, it's like a tank. We need to divide into many, but I'm really, quite interested because suddenly I thought, am I from Kulliyyah of Economics or a stack? Suddenly I went back to my home, a stack, and then, listening to all those terms and everything, subhanAllah. So the basic thing that what I identified is actually, when you are trying to talk about Islamic economics, I think you are going further. You are going in deep, you want to talk about, let's say, Imanic economics or Aqaid, more than Sharia economics, Aqaid economics, I think, which the approach, though the Aqidah, the Hukum Adi, Hukum Aqli, Hukum Shar'i, it's quite old, many scholars talked about it quite long time, but the approach to Islamic economics is quite new. I hope our audience today they grasp this approach, because most of the time we see this philosophy, religion and science, three separate things. So how do we see all three things together? So this is how Dr. Mahyudi brought these three things, Hukum Adi, Hukum Aqli, Hukum Shar'i together, so that we can see and we can actually develop a discipline based on this Hukum Adi. I really thank Dr. Mahyudi, because he also called myself also few meetings. I'm really happy, and then I learn a lot from the discussion. That's quite interesting. So I think this is something, because we are of course facing, like Dr. Mahyudi said, we are really facing this identity crisis when it comes to Islamic economics, because when I have to define Islamic economics, I have more than 20 definitions. When I teach my students, I don't have one single definition to give. So I need to gather everything. And then again, we in a way that we are thinking whether this definition should be elaborated, or should be focused, or should be deeply discussed. I think this is one way of doing it. I think we are here. We have, mashallah, plenty of scholars in this group. Not only our Kulliyyah of Economics scholars, I also see some from outside. So I really welcome all of you, and share your thought, share your concerns, and you can ask your questions to Dr. Mahyudi, knowing that this is a very humble, at the same time quite effective approach to Islamic economics, because we need to find that deep. We need to go that, because like this is what I learned from Prof. Because we have issues in dividing the religious and non-religious stuff. Sometimes we say, okay, this is the religious thing, so we do. This is a secular thing, so we do this. So somehow when I have to, if I believe in two different things, and when I have to interpret Quranic verses, so what I do actually, I will be fitting those interpretations according to what I believe, what I understand from secularistic view. But is it the right thing to do? So I think that's because we see two different things, and then we want to merge together, or we have to create a new discipline for Islamic economics. So this is actually a fundamental discussion question. I hope some of you can come into this argument, like what it says, a Tawhidic Epistemology argument. So please come in, share your concerns. Hopefully this will be a very useful session for all of us. Tafaddal, please go ahead. Yes, Dr. Riyasat, yes.
Yeah, I didn't say anything, but okay.
You're visible and you're
first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Mahyudi. I thought it was quite a brilliant effort to bring everything together, especially from the Islamic side. I agree that of late we haven't been really focusing on, the Islamic side or our normative side of things. So I think it's a very grand effort, to use your word, to try and consolidate everything in a cohesive manner. In fact, this has been an issue with me when I look at it from the other side. I always wonder, okay, so whose framework do we use as a reference? So I think this is a good starting point to kind of move forward. At least there is something there. And I think it's nice if we can sort of stick to one thing and then work on it and develop it. So I think this is a great effort. One thing, it's not so much to poke at or anything, but I just wanted to understand, in one of the earlier slides, I can't recall which, you had said that the purpose is to prove the existence and the oneness of Allah, right? The idea of a Tawhidic methodology. Now, when I look at the framework, right, it has a lot to do with us Muslims dealing with this framework, as opposed to maybe, Westerners, and since we're catering to them. So we're using our basis, and we're using it for ourselves. When I say ourselves, I mean Muslims. So when we use the word prove, I don't have a problem with it, but I was thinking maybe should we use the word affirm, because we don't have to prove God's existence so much as to affirm and kind of say that this is how it fits into the network, sorry, into the grand scheme of things. So when we say prove, and so again, it depends on who the framework is targeting. If, for example, we want to adopt as a global framework, as one civilization, we want other people to accept it, then it makes sense. The terminology makes total sense. But if, for example, it is us, for us to use it, then maybe we might use something like affirm or something. Again, it's a very, a small niggle here, nothing that important. The other thing I was curious about was, when you talked about some of the philosophical underpinnings of the different schools of thought which under Sunni, right? Like, for example, we noticed that some of their central tenets are, somewhat contradicting, right, each other, right? Like, for example, the over-reliance on reason, or the over-reliance on textual interpretation, right, quite literal interpretations. We do not exactly see eye to eye, or the schools different, they have completely different underpinning philosophies. At the same time, we have the challenge of being as inclusive as possible, right? So some of the constructions that you are making, right, like when you are extending, let's say, the Maturidi or the Ash'ari school philosophy, right, we realize that we're missing some of these other narratives. What is your position on this? Do you think that it's okay to leave out those narratives, or do you think this framework can also accommodate these other views? I'm looking at it as, just like, for me personally speaking, right, I came from a more liberal background in terms of understanding religion, right, and then IIUM kind of really helped me with that. But I also, when I look at some people who take a stronger position, right, on Islam, it helps me stay grounded and close to, the original, let's say, our heritage, the way it was, the classical interpretations. At the same time, we also need a very liberal version, or of Islam, for us to also make sure that we keep adapting to the times and we don't become irrelevant. So I somehow feel that, we need all these kinds of narratives to make sure that we do have a balanced approach. We need the extremely conservative interpretations of versions, and we also need the extremely liberal ones, so that we can kind of, enrich Islamic economics. So just those issues. Thanks.
Which one, Dr. Riyasat, extreme or liberal?
As I said, personally, I benefited from both, because sometimes when I take a very open I have a very open understanding, and then I see the other side, then I realize that how some of that, holds the core values together, and I completely understand the importance of it. Other times when I see a very strong or very inflexible interpretation of things, sometimes I look at the other side and I say that, well, this is actually what's causing, some stagnation. So that's why I feel that, the framework should have, all these, it should be inclusive in that sense.
All right, Dr. Mahyudi, do you want to go for it, or should I ask for more questions?
Yeah, okay, just a quick comment first. Whether you want to choose affirm or prove, I think yes, of course, I have no issue with affirm as well. But looking at when we talk about qiyas, it's actually proving with natijah. You have premise 1, premise 2, and natijah, right? You have the major premise, minor premise, and conclusion. This is qiyas. Okay, so that kind of exercise is trying to prove the soundness of the argument. Okay, but then affirm is the conclusion. Once you take in the natijah, then you are actually looking at how the natijah, the conclusion, affirm to your belief, of course. Okay, and as for the narrative and all, I think I have to remind on the caveat just now. Actually, we are, in my case, we are users. That's why we are users of the pointers from ilmu aqaid. We are users. So we are looking at how all these foundational positions will help us in making sure that we do not go overboard. And the beauty of Asy'ariyah and Maturidi tradition is that first, the character of the harmony that I have mentioned, the harmony between naqal wal aqal. That is the character trait. So in my case, I'm just benefiting that. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'm emphasizing on that to allow us to have a readiness, a kind of readiness to see the integratedness of the science. Okay, so that is my quick response. But can I just respond to Dr. Nizam's question?
Yes.
In the chat.
Do you want me to read first for others?
Sure.
Okay. This is from Dr. Nizam. He asked you to briefly summarize your definition of integrated science, because Islamic economics generally rejects the labeling of normative versus positive economics to represent the ideal behavior versus the reality/observed behavior due to the un-Islamic assumption behind a logical positivism. So what would be a suitable terms to reflect the discussion of ideal versus reality/observed behavior in Islamic economics? That's the
well,
question.
my good friend Dr. Nizam is asking me to make another PhD thesis.
Another talk at least.
No, the problem is I do not have enough to talk about in response to his question. Okay, now for another topic,
Maybe Dr. Mahyudi, maybe Dr. Nizam is hinting me to call him for the next seminar.
That's even better. Excellent.
Thank you, Dr. Nizam, for letting me know. Okay, go ahead.
But when we talk about definitions, I think it's too early, and it's putting the cart before the horse. I think it's not a useful exercise at this point. That's why I only go by the traits or the elements expected. The second slide ending my presentation just now have the character or the elements or what I expect or what I think integrated science is, and where you have, of course, we are trying to actually, what I'm trying to suggest is we have to internalize the Tawhidic epistemology so that we can naturally bring forth our discussion without being restricted by the binary classification of normative, formative, normative. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, let's prepare ourselves, internalizing the Tawhidic epistemology, so that we can actually project a more natural science. Natural in the sense that
Original.
something more organic, something that is born out of our own understanding of things based on the lens of Tawhidic epistemology. Okay, so it doesn't mean that we will declassify this demarcation between positive, normative. It will forever be there. Once it's there, it will forever be there. It is just that we can tone down the need for that kind of demarcation, and for that we have to first and foremost internalize the Tawhidic epistemology lah. That is my argument there. As for the ideal versus reality, well, this is again, put it simply, if we go by a more grounded science, we will be closer to reality. How to make it closer to the ideal is where the wada'i element comes. The wada'i element comes, you have to put in proper policies that is backed by proper science, proper theory. So we cannot actually talk about policies before really understanding the theory. Without any proper theory building, we are not supposed to be jumping the gun with policy formulation. Unless and until we have a proper theory to back things up, then only we can bring proper policy measures. So we become more grounded in our policy. We are not in our attempt to be closer to the ideal, we are not being too idealistic. We are more grounded to the knowledge part. That's what I'm trying to promote here indirectly.
Dr. Mahyudi, I just also observe, when you say, or when you talk about the Tawhidic epistemology argument, what I see is actually there is a universality is there. It is actually universal in the sense that those who believe in God, those who are not believe in God, let's say they are the atheist. I don't think few percentage, but they are still, what they call it, dominance is there. But if we look into those people who believe in religion, who believe in God, I think this approach is actually quite useful, quite beneficial for all of us. But what happened? We follow the system whereby man is the God. Man is God. The economics, we actually serve, we worship man rather than we worship God, because we want to fulfill his desires, we want to fulfill we want to make the maximization of his profit, because he is playing God. So that is not the universal idea of the majority of the people of the world, at least now. Even if, in fact, you talk about United States, I know they still believe in God. They say God saves America, God saves United States, according to their life and everything. So yes, I see the universe. But yes, coming back to what Dr. Nizam and also Dr. Yasad raising the questions, it's valid questions in the sense that, because we are actually teaching, most of the time we are teaching that economics, whereby actually all these values comes in. Thank you very much for your discussion for all of us. So I also need more suggestion, concerns, questions. Yes, I see my guru is there, Dr. Mustafa. Please, a few words.
Yeah.
Okay, please, anybody else who wants to just give your concern, questions?
Allow me to
suggestions?
just
Yes.
I remember there's one angle of Dr. Riazat's point that I missed out. Basically about the engagement with contemporary discourse. And actually, when we look at the Asy'ariyah Maturidiyah manhaj, that has been the character. We want to engage. We want to engage so much so that we are not sectarian in the first place. Al-Ghazali has this book, Faisal Baina Firaq. Faisal Tafriqah Baina al-Islam wal Zandaqah. Okay, so this small book is how he tries to combat takfiri and at the same time he's trying to make it sound inclusive. The Islamic project is actually inclusive. We don't go around to say, you know, there's a need for engagement rather than trying to put others on the side. That is something, again, a character trait of the A&M manhaj, as far as I know.
Yes, that's correct. I just noticed, I didn't notice before, Prof. Aslam is here. Prof, without your comments, I don't think this seminar is complete. Please, if you are capable of saying something, please. Yes, Prof.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Assalam.
You know, I came in late, and so I have
Okay.
great reservation in commenting because I missed, I think, half an hour in the early part, but I got the latter maybe 40 minutes. And so I wasn't actually planning to say something, but I had made some
Sorry,
notes.
Prof.
And, no, it's okay. If Dr. Mahyudi will and others will forgive me if I say things that you may have, you know, mentioned in the earlier part. But I think, you know, there are some points that I maybe would like to share, and some of them maybe may get a response from Dr. Mahyudi or others here. The first a couple of points, just, you know, let me just say that I'm so happy that we have this topic being discussed. Yeah. I can only say that, and I think I've come to the point where I'm always talking about history. Yeah? And I remember 25 years ago, we organized the Kulliyyah of Economics organized trip to Assoc to listen to Prof. Alatas talk about Islamic worldview, philosophy of science, and you know how it is important for us to know. And later on, we continued with the lecture from Dr. Wan Muhammad Noor and Prof. Al-Prasalan. Yeah, so it was 3 sessions. And we were hoping to do many more, but at that point in time, I got a couple of feedback from colleagues. They say that it is very, very hard, very difficult, and you know they wanted to have more practical topics. All right, and so I'm so happy that we are hopefully not the first and last, but the first of many more to come. Yeah? You know, in developing Islamic economics, we have to recognize that there are different groups of scholars that we need. Okay, we need what we may call economic theorists, economic technicians, those who are in applied areas of economics, and we need what we may call economic philosophers, or those who talk about the foundations of the discipline. So I think today's talk, we can place it in that last category, which I think unless we have a clear picture and develop this, then your theory, your application, and maybe even the technical part may not necessarily be, you know, what represents Islamic economics. So it's a very important area that we are focusing on. When we talk about philosophy, we are talking about those three areas: ontology, epistemology, axiology, at least, right? Although there may be a few others that we could add. And when we talk about these three areas and apply it to Islamic economics as a science, then there must be a subject matter, which I caught at the last part. Dr. Mahyudi was saying definitions may not be, may not be something that we should do now. I may disagree a little bit. I think even if we may not have a final definition, there is a need for a working definition, or else, you can be going all over the place. So, okay, a subject matter, and then methods, methodology. I think this is where it was the discussion. And the third area, the values and ethical implications of your discipline. Maybe one of the big weaknesses of Islamic economics so far, especially Islamic finance, has been the lack of emphasis and a lack to see Islamic economics and finance as having this ethical dimension. So it's very important to talk about these foundations. Yeah? So the epistemological focus, which is what Dr. Mahyudi, I hope, the earlier part was not something totally different. Sources of knowledge and how to deal with them. Right? So you want to develop Islamic economics, you have sources of knowledge, but you have to deal with those sources of knowledge and put them together. So he's using the term integrated approach. Okay. And I'm assuming as well, although he may not have mentioned it, or he may have mentioned it in the earlier slides, if you talk about the Islamization of knowledge general framework, you have your Turath and you have your modern knowledge, and there is interaction, right? There is interaction. So the idea to connect Islamic economics to Aqidah, I found very refreshing, because most of the time when we talk about Islamic economics, it will be connected to fiqh. And I remember in discussions with Prof. Saiful and Marhum Zakaria Man, we used to always say that, actually the area or the intellectual area of Kalam is actually very relevant to the development of economics, Islamic economics. Why? You're dealing with human beings. Yeah, you're dealing with that ethical dimension. You're dealing with, free will. How free are you? Freedom, etc. So I like this idea, and maybe just I'm sure Dr. Mahyudi may know this. If we look at Western economics and look at the evolution of economics, they also initially tried to connect economics to the divine scheme, not the scheme of things, the divine scheme. Okay, so there was always that attempt in the 18th century, and then according to what was written, something happened in the second and third quarter of the 19th century, okay, where after that there was no attempt to connect economics to the divine. So that period, second and third quarter of 19th century, would make a wonderful area for anybody who wants to do research. What happened in the West that broke the link? All right. Now, what Dr. Mahyudi is trying to do is saying we need to go back to that. Islamic economics cannot be separated from, from that divine scheme. So that's a wonderful thing. A few comments maybe to Dr. Mahyudi. You made you put together Ash'ariyah and Maturidi as one. I'm not sure. Is that an agreement with all scholars? Because there would be many Maturidi scholars who may have problems with positions taken by the Ash'ari theologians. Yeah. So by putting it together, are you? Sorry.
Not much, Prof, because I'm Maturidi and Dr. Mahyudi is Ash'ari.
Yeah, but I'm talking from the literature. I mean, I've been in a few. I have to say, not many discussions, but the idea of putting it together is like trying to claim the middle ground. Okay, when there could be areas in which they may not agree, yeah? Especially when we are talking about some of those things about free will, etc. There are people who are still very critical of the Ash'ari position. Although again, it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum. You got people. So that idea I thought was very interesting. If we can do that and convince everybody, this may be the way forward. This division, normative, positive, ideals, realities, should be, what is, you know, I think we can't run away from that. It's going to be there. Even in Islamic economics, when we theorize and develop our models, we are still going to be doing it based on our interpretation of the sources, the primary sources, and of our interpretation of reality. So we are going to develop our models, right? And there will still be a difference between the practice and your model. I mean, if you can get it perfect, it's wonderful. But I don't think it's possible because human beings are there. And when human beings are there, what the economic philosopher does, or even the economist does, the common man may not do. So you will still have that division. And I think it's right what was mentioned. Yeah, we will need to live with it. Just like, you know, we have to live with COVID-19, we have to live with this demarcation. Now, the issue will be, how do we decide what is that ideal? What is that ideal? And even though there is difference between the ideal and the reality, how do we reconcile the two? Okay, and maybe to ask Dr. Mahyudi, do you think it is worthwhile to look at Islamic economics when we develop this you know, way of dealing with ideal and reality, to actually allow for multiple possibilities? So there is no one true and only true theory of Islamic economics. There could be a variety of positions, right? And how will then we settle it? We leave it as different schools of economics, just like we have different schools of fiqh. We will leave it to different schools of economics. One may be, you know, accepted at one time, something else may not be accepted, etc. So that could be, I think this could be maybe one way. Yeah. Last point, you know, in the writings of Sheikh Taha Jabir, he also uses the term Tawhidic Episteme. Yeah? I'm just wondering whether there is a different, is it just the preference to use Tawhidic Episteme rather than Tawhidic Epistemology? I think that maybe is just maybe a query to me lah. But really well done. Thank you very much. I really would like to you know, hope that this series can continue, and please, you know, we have Prof Hazim, as mentioned by Dr. Mahyudi. We have Prof Osman Bakar, who can talk maybe on certain aspects. I mean, it would be wonderful to make it a series, and I wish it would go on, yeah, for a few more sessions. Yeah, wallahu alam. Salam.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dr. Mahyudi,
Okay, quick response.
Yes.
As a show of respect to Professor Aslam. Well, first and foremost, when I mentioned about Asy'ariyah wal Maturidi, earlier on I showed actually a picture of how A&M represents Sunni orthodoxy. So basically, Sunni orthodoxy is what we are referring to here in our discussion in my case. Okay, reason being, it is well tested. That's why I emphasize on the yellow line. It's a well tested manhaj throughout the history of Islam. You have all these great luminaries in the yellow line that I've shown to represent the Asy'ariyah wal Maturidi. So that's the reason why I'm focusing on that. Apart from that is actually the point is clear. The more philosophical point is, you need to know thyself. You need to know yourself. So in other words, how do I define Islamic in the Islamic economics? I internalize it tawhidically. I internalize it aqidahly. In the manner how I understand my own aqidah. I'm not forcing others to follow. I'm just trying to say that I am presenting what I learned from the Sifat 20. And I want to actually internalize it first and foremost, so that I'm clear about my self-identity. From my self-identity, I engage with the reality. I engage with my research problems. I then produce my works of science contributing to Islamic economics. That is the trajectory that I am proposing. Having said that, again, the first or second page, where the same page where we talk about Sunni orthodoxy, we have the Mu'tazili, and then of course we have the Shi'i. And of course, the reason why I purposely mentioned Faisal Tafriqah Bain al-Islam wal Zandaqah, just trying to say, I'm trying to emulate the spirit of Imam al-Ghazali, where he actually takes things inclusively, even when he wants to reject Ismaili doctrines through his Qistas al-Mustaqim. So this is the beauty of the Manhaj A&M. We have such readiness to engage with anyone at the level where we can bring it practically. So much so that I want to now refer to this work by Professor Basil At-Ta'i, when he looked at God, nature, and the cause. For a physician, whoever in the realm of physics, you know that he's talking about things on the ground. He's not talking about something in the air, even though he is actually talking about Ash'ari wal Maturidiyah doctrines. In physics, in philosophizing physics, when he talk about now science actually acknowledge indeterminism. You cannot talk about determinism anymore. From that double split experiment, you can never have certainty of 100% of anything, even in the real world, even in the physical world. There's no such thing of 100% reality. There is that 0.0000000. He mentioned that 0 to the power of something lah. How small things can be not zero. The probability of things falling to the ground is actually not 1. It is actually 0.0000000. So in the yes. So that's my point. We can bring, even now the challenge is for people like me to internalize my understanding of Ash'ari wal Maturidi, understanding about the slight difference between Ash'ari wal Maturidi in the case of whether you want to call it ikhtiyar, whether you want to call it qasab. How is the position of Qudrah Haditha in the scheme of understanding free will? So all this actually refined discussion, but bear in mind, our starting point here, I put it qualifier earlier on, that I am a user. So when you are a user, you are a secondary beneficiary of the theories in Usuluddin. So in other words, as much as it has not gone to the fore of the discussion, the old stuff is still relevant for me to consume in trying to project the Aqidah doctrine of Ash'ari wal Maturidiyah. In fact, one can actually say, due to the longevity and continuity of discussion in Aqaid matters, in responding to the challenges of the world, we can say that the Ash'ari wal Maturidiyah scheme of things are very much coherent and consistent. And this is the reason, epistemological reason, why I am holding on to the manhaj. Having said that, I know I have to engage and allow for other tracks of Islamic economics. There's no chance for me to say that this Ash'ari wal Maturidiyah is the Islamic economics. There's no chance. That shouldn't be the way. I am actually against Al-Ghazali if I were to do that. Because in the end he says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Ahlul Qiblah, that is actually the freedom that we can actually appreciate the spectrum of Islamic thought. Never are we trying to reject any. I'm trying to say that I want to know myself. How then akidahly? Then I work as economists. I try to philosophize economics. I try to theorize economics. And that's the only way for me to manifest. Remember, actually, Prof. Aslam, in the event that you moderated, Prof. Aslam said beautifully, what is civilization if not the manifestation of the inner world? Quote. So this is what I'm trying to say. That's why I say I have to know myself internally. Then only I will manifest it in a coherent manner with the right balance of naqal wal aqal to allow me to say this is what Islam is to me. And due to the sa'wa'idul a'zam of the manhaj asy'ariyah wal maturidiyah, when I do that, I am allowing others within that manhaj to benefit it directly, and others be outside of the manhaj to benefit it indirectly. So as you can see, I'm trying to be inclusive, trying to actually respect how the past scholars of Asy'ariyah Maturidiyah has brought the project of manifesting the inner world to the exterior world.
All right then. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahyudi. Thank you very much. Prof. Aslam, anything you want to follow up? It's all right. Okay, good. Okay then, so any other questions? Anyone from the floor? Do you want to ask? Do you want to suggest, comment? All right. Okay, then in that case, let me just start thanking once again, especially going from the last. I think I want to thank the Prof. Aslam, especially his comments, on when he said about, the topics that we can look into, those where exactly what happened to the divine perspective of those Western scholars. I think now, I hope there will be, a new line of students, especially master students or PhD students want to do, especially the thesis on that particular topic. But it is all possible only, inshallah, in our department meetings. And, I hope Prof. Aslam is with us all the time, of course. He will be guiding us, also, promoting this to do more research on this. Hopefully it will. Thank you so much for that. And before that, Dr. Yasad and also Dr. Nizam and others, everybody, your comments and suggestions, made this event even beautiful, even more beneficial. Especially today is a Friday. I think now I guess we are all very close to that, Jum'ah. The Jum'ah, so I think it's a holy day, of course, for us. It's a Friday. And let me also finally thank Dr. Mahyudi to bring this, to bring this very interesting topic as well, and then bring us to a new approach. I would say what he is trying to do, not necessarily it has to only to be applied in Islam, in economics. This approach, this whether it is you call Kalam approach or Aqidah approach, once we know how to make discipline out of this can be applied to psychology, can be applied to sociology, any other social sciences. I think, in future, inshallah, all of us can work together on this. Amazing, the work will be, inshallah, if we work on it. And like Prof. Aslam suggested, it has to be series, Dr. Mahyudi. So you have to be ready for it.
He was mentioning other names, other professors. He was not referring to me.
No, all of us.
We can have Dr. Mahyudi. I also agree that the topic that was discussed today is too much maybe for one session. So it could be also broken up. Yeah.
Yes,
and
Prof.
I think there is, Mahmoud Abu Saud talked about methodology of behavioral sciences. So we could on one hand look at human sciences, behavioral sciences, but I do believe that there may be some differences also within it, because one is doing economics, one is doing psychology, so there may be some slight differences, but generally they are human sciences or social sciences.
That's why we need all of you to come together and make this kind of events happen. Once again, we can benefit each other. And finally, I need to thank all of you, all the participants. Without your participation, there is no event like this. And all of you, whoever of course came, and then because of 10 minutes delay, myself, I apology from myself, I should finish at 12. It's 12:10. So all of you, thank you very much for this wonderful event. Wabillahi tawfiq, ma'as-salama, and Jum'ah Mubarakah. Let us conclude with Surah Al-Asr. And tasbih kafara.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you for any much.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much.
Mahyudi, are you still around?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were so many names. Who are they? I don't recognize. Do you know who they are? Are they students or lecturers or?
Yes, Prof. I think only half of them from our department. According to my attendance, Alhamdulillah, we have around only 20. I think only 20 plus, but the remaining 20, I think, comes outside.
So we don't know who they are. I mean, we
don't know who they are. Most probably, for example, I forwarded to Assoc, the group.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
I also forwarded to Assoc.
Yeah.
Many are actually our students. I can notice my ex-student there, Sufyan Sharif.
There were two professors came from engineering as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, engineering, there were two of them.
Why I'm saying this is because there could be a smaller group that from this session, there could be a group that is more seriously interested in this, and we can actually try to develop this this group into a research cluster or something like that, to share ideas. That would be a wonderful thing to do.
Yes, Prof.
Ibn Khaldun University.
University.
Yeah, they have that multiplex group. They call themselves Istanbul Circle.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah.
They do.
I remember we tried to mention to Prof. Kamal, we can call it the Sungai Pusu Circle, but he was not very